Hi, everyone. This is Arry, Chair of the Cascadia Blockchain Council, and your host for Windshield Time podcast, and also the Blockchain Underground meeting series, Meetup. On November 12th, Friday, we had Kristy-Leigh Minehan, former CTO for Core Scientific and just extraordinary woman, join us for an AMA. She talked about all sorts of things, her past with Genesis Mining, Bitmain, incentive engineering, Taproot, Solana's, the Zuko's Triangle, Proof of Stake, EVM, which is the Ethereum virtual machine, the Olympus DAO. So many things were covered. I learned so much, so I hope you really enjoyed this AMA. Don't forget, we have an AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything, every Friday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. PST. You can find us on the Blockchain Underground on Meetup, and it's free. It's open for all. We record the AMAs with guests and post them for you in case you miss them, because not everyone's free every time. And, I'm here to help you. So, feel free to find me in our Slack channel, in any of the Meetup groups on Telegram or Twitter. And let's work together on making this space even better and better. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share. And thanks for joining us. Bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have Kristy-Leigh Minehan with us as our guest for the AMA. Kristy, thank you so much for making time with us. And thanks for everyone that's joining us to be a part of this AMA today on this very rainy, windy, rainy day.
Thank you so much for having me. Really great to be here and excited to answer any questions anyone has.
Yeah, I'm sure we have tons of tips, because I've told everyone that we can ask you anything and everything because you're awesome. Can you give us like the long form 5-minute spiel about your background and how you got to where you got to? How did you get into crypto? How did you get into Bitcoin? How'd you end up where you are right now?
I'm still trying to figure that out, actually. Yeah, I'm not very good at introductions. So when I was 19 years old, I got involved in crypto through IRC chat rooms. So white paper was dropped into an IRC chat room. Friends were all super excited about it. And I was excited because my friends were excited. I was young, I was naive, didn't know anything about economics. I had dropped out of high school, so I'm not a traditionally taught, I don't have a degree, not traditionally taught. Everything I have and know, I've learned on the job. Mm-hmm. And then when the first Bitcoin software actually was released, friends and I got really excited and started mining Bitcoin. And back then, they were inherently worthless. But what was really interesting to us was trying to make hash rate go higher. And how would you do that back then? Well, you'd overclock your laptop or your desktop. You'd optimize your memory. You'd do all the things that gamers do to get a higher FPS, except here it was like a very light video game. Hash rate would go up, number go up. And that is addicting to a lot of us, just staring at a screen and watching the number tick up. And eventually, we had maxed out. We were sharing all these tips and tricks and, how'd you get that hash rate? What'd you do? Oh, you have this CPU. I have this one. What do you think? We were always sharing. And then eventually one of the mates comes in and drops a 30-40% increase, I think it was, and doesn't tell us how he's done it. And he's a complete, he's really mean about it. And I was so thoroughly outraged that he was keeping secrets from the group that I was like, you know what? I'm going to do whatever he did. And eventually he told us that he'd gone in and written his own optimized CPU market. I was like, you know what? This guy's not that smart. If he can do that, I can do that. Keep in mind, I was very young, had done very little software development at the time, knew nothing about C and C++, but through the course of 3 months, taught myself until eventually I dropped a screenshot and I was 5% higher than he was. It was like, suck it. Suck it. I can do that too. And it was the best feeling in the world. And that moment right there, that adrenaline rush, that is what has fueled my entire journey into crypto. Because every single time from that point on, I was like, you know what, this is really fun. This stimulates a part of my brain. I really like making things work efficiently. I like making them go faster. And so from there, I started writing optimized CPU miners for all sorts of different altcoins. Eventually got into GPU mining, started writing optimized GPU miners. Again, back then I was not anything special. I just had a GPU card, a desktop, and just a lot of, not even determination, just wanting to, you know, make that number go higher. And we call that incentive engineering. And it's one of the key parts of mechanism design that makes crypto so fantastic, which is how do you align participants' incentives and reward them accordingly for work that you want to be done. And the end goal of mining is we want it to be as energy efficient as possible. We want to spend the minimum number of, like we want to spend the minimum amount of energy to produce all of those hashes. And so this amazing incentive engineering teaches you how to do that as a software developer. There's nothing in the world like it. And when you go into traditional software development and you work at some place like Microsoft or Google, you know, when you actually build your products, when you write your code, you don't get to push it out to your customers immediately. You don't get that feedback loop. What crypto does is you do a very small optimization and immediately you start making a few cents more or a few dollars more. Mm-hmm. That feedback is so addictive, and it's fueled an entire generation of software devs. So then in 2015, I decided to come out of my pseudonymous identity back then and took on the identity of Oh God, a Girl, joined Genesis Mining as their cryptographic engineer. And then 2 weeks later, my boss calls me up and he's like, you know some stuff about hardware, right? Yeah. He's like, great. Do you want to go to China? And I'd never traveled at this point. Or that's not true. I traveled to Canada, which I'm not sure you'd call traveling from Australia to Canada like really an adventure. They're pretty like docile areas, right? Mm-hmm. And then I traveled a little bit to Sweden and then Germany, but never, like, China's a big journey. I was like, yeah, sure. For how long? And the idea was China would just be, you know, a few days to check out some stuff. And I ended up living there for 2.5 years. Wow. And that was a pretty difficult experience because most people, when they go into China, you know, they're living in Shanghai, they're living in Beijing, they're living in some of the more tourist-friendly areas. Mm-hmm. I was smack bang in the middle of Fuzhou where no one spoke any English. All I had was my phone for Google Translate, and that was banned. So you had to go into Microsoft Translate, and it was rough, but it was a good character building experience. We built 850 megawatt data center there. Genesis Mining was the largest cryptocurrency miner back in 2015 until 2017, I'd say. Mm. And then in 2018, I left and I joined Core Scientific, which is here in the Pacific Northwest, though they've just started to move to Texas. And I had been a customer of theirs and one of their largest clients at the time, and they were bringing in this guy called Kevin Turner. Didn't know who that was, didn't know that name. Everyone was like, oh, you have to meet Kevin. He is a legend. I'm like, who the hell is Kevin? And then he turns out to be the COO of Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And me at that time, I'm completely against big corporations. Oh. So I'm like, ew, Microsoft, like down with the corporate man. But Kevin asked me to be his founding CTO, and I originally said no, and then I thought about it, and we talked, and I thought about it some more, and ended up saying yes. And Core Scientific's now a $4.3 billion company. It will SPAC next year. And that was probably the greatest experience of my life, getting to learn how to build a public company from scratch from someone like Kevin as his right hand. It was truly amazing. And then, 2020, joined Leica Cameras to launch the Lights phone in Japan. Big pivot from crypto. I needed a bit of a break. And now I'm just working on a bit of a stealth project, which will hopefully launch soon. So
interesting. Yeah, like your background, your story, and just how everything unfolded each time. I'm just like, how it's just jaw-dropping and crazy and amazing. And yeah, I mean, you say character building, but it's just surreal. And especially for someone so young and in the female form, you know, you don't typically see that in technology, let alone crypto or blockchain. So it's a really inspiring. I guess I want to go back to like what you were talking about with incentive engineering. I'll ask my one question, and then I'll, you know, folks in the audience want to ask questions, queue them up in the chat, and or you know, put your emoji up if you want to ask questions. But the whole energy efficiency and ESG narrative is like really weighing down on my heart, especially in the Bitcoin and the crypto blockchain universe, especially with regulators kind of poo-pooing it. And I guess what would you say to help educate folks that are really concerned about the energy usage of Bitcoin mining and you know, are worried about the environment?
Do your own research, but do not look at media for research. That's the first thing. Learning about the Bitcoin mining industry is kind of difficult. It was pretty much kept in shadows until 2019. Core Scientific did a tremendous job, you know, bringing some of this to light, but miners historically have kept things like their energy footprint quite confidential, their hash power, how much money they actually have, how they operate. And then what happened with the China ban is that all of this hash rate has started to come into the US. And there is this big race to be the biggest public mining company. You might have noticed there's lots and lots of little mining companies right now that are public. Well, they all want to be the best and the biggest. And that is, again, incentive engineering, right? The manufacturers want to work with these nice, polished public companies because this is Bitcoin going enterprise. Bitcoin going big, Bitcoin, you know, maturing. And so they often get access to the first round of hardware, and then they have the capital reserves because they naturally have that bit more trust associated with them. But doing your own research is super important. Most mining farms are 50% or higher green, clean energy, especially here in the US. Miners go out of their way to conserve their energy footprint. We write our own firmware to make sure that our ASICs are more efficient than the manufacturer can provide. We are constantly looking for ways to reuse all of the wasted heat. We buy carbon credits. We look to use only solar, only nuclear, only some mining farms here are entirely wind powered, which is good and bad. You know, miners care a lot. Just this week, Bitmain announced their S19 XP, which is their green ASIC. And they have a green edition, so every purchase comes with carbon credits. So even manufacturers are getting into this game. And then it's not fair to just point at Bitcoin and go, well, this consumes energy. You also have to look at, well, what else consumes that amount of energy? How much does Facebook consume, or Meta now? How much does Netflix consume, Twitter? What do these data centers consume? What's their energy footprint? How much does the internet as a whole consume? How much does the traditional banking industry in America alone consume? And let's not just point at the hardware. Let's point at all of the human capital as well. And you have to do this, and it's difficult. And a lot of the media and journalism you see out there, actually 99% of it that comes from traditional mainstream media, does not do that work. They just repeat these narratives. And the reality is anything worth existing is going to consume energy, and that's okay. Everything will consume energy. It's about what kind of energy do you consume and what are you putting back into the environment.
Yeah, recently we're going at round 3 at proposing a working group again, blockchain working group in Washington. And I know you helped with the testimonials before. Thank you for that. And so we have some early regulators showing concern about wanting an energy study of the environmental impacts of blockchain. And so I guess to pick your brain a little bit, what would be your suggestion on how to address those in a working group, or what would you like to see?
Well, tell them first, sure, but then you also have to fund a study to do to look at the energy consumption of the traditional banking system. If Bitcoin's goal is to be the best money, right? That is its end ultimate goal. And all of this mining, that is putting coins into the ecosystem and powering this chain. That is the banking system. So if regulators want to get a research study or a research report that addresses all of these environmental concerns, it's fine, but you have to have something to compare it to. And it's not comparing it to Visa, it's not comparing it to PayPal, let's go compare this to Bank of America and JP Morgan and TD Ameritrade and all of the other banks. And let's actually see who's the most energy efficient, because hands down, Bitcoin is going to win. And keep in mind, Bitcoin's a global banking system. It is a global monetary system. So now let's go add up the energy of all of the different banks around the world and what they consume. Who is going to win that bet? And then I think the next step on that is you would need to do a quick, if they want to exclusively look at US, they want to focus on the US, you'd want to talk to each and every mining farm. You'd probably want to do some tours and understand what is their energy footprint, what is their energy makeup, how much green energy do they have compared to other energy sources? What are they doing? Are they purchasing carbon credits? How are they offsetting some of their footprint? You'd want to ask them about what is their recycling program. Many folks don't know, but ASICs are a lot better now. They used to only have a 9-month operating life. Now they have a 5 to 6 year life. But when you're running that much hardware at scale, of course, there's always, dead parts. So what is their recycling program? How are they handling all of this waste? You'd want to ask them about, you'd also want to see how just generally they operate as businesses. What are their healthcare and incentive programs? Compare that to the banking industry. I think no one's done that study before, and it would be eye-opening to a lot of people.
Really, really good feedback. Thank you. I definitely furiously writing notes. Anybody from the audience that want to take a question? Come on, you got questions.
I do.
All right, Raphael, go.
Hi, Kristy. Nice to meet you. Kristy-Leigh, nice to meet you. My name is Raphael. I'm from Minnesota. I had a question in terms of a lot of the outlook. Sometimes people come back to the negatives or the downsides of what we're seeing here. What is the thing that you're most excited about this industry in general? And I will say, you're not allowed to say your project in stealth, because that would be too easy. Something else.
Again, the kind of talent this industry is training. So what I said before at the start, this incentive engineering, let me take a step back. When I came to America, I was really surprised by the low quality of software development. And in China, when in China, most engineers, they grow up understanding hardware and software. And if you want to be a really, really good software dev, you need to intimately understand how your program is affecting hardware. And that is important. That's what gives China its edge in the great technology race. That's why they create such amazing things, and why they're so far ahead of the game of everyone else. And I come to America, and I find that most of the software devs, especially here in Washington, are more application and web devs. And most of the software engineers you do recruit know very little about hardware. They don't understand anything about machine sympathy. They don't understand anything about optimizing your code to make sure it's efficient, test coverage. In crypto, we need these things, and we don't have a boss that is telling us to go and implement this. This is the amazing thing. You have engineers that are entirely self-taught, self-driven, because number go up means more money. Like, they're earning their own paycheck, and the harder they work, the more money they will get. that is what I'm most excited about, because there is hundreds of people like me that are sitting in Ethereum right now and in Bitcoin, and there's hundreds of thousands more across all of the different altcoins. And in 5 to 10 years, there's going to be even more of us. What is the world going to look like when crypto has taught an entire new generation of engineers how to build?
So if I'm I'm not an engineer, but if I'm a hardworking engineer with 5 to 8 years experience, I've done software application development, a little mobile development. How do I go about learning about hardware? I mean, take it apart and go take electrical engineering courses. What does that mean?
You don't even need to start learning hardware. If you want to get involved in crypto, the easiest way to start is through Ethereum right now, because Ethereum, the EVM, if you want to write a really efficient smart contract, at some point in your time in Ethereum, you're going to have to learn how the EVM works. And the EVM is this software-defined virtual machine, essentially, where all these programs run. And there's something called bytecode optimization. So how can you ensure that you spend the least amount of ether to execute all the operations your smart contract needs? So at some point, you're going to get into Ethereum, you're going to learn about how the EVM works, and that's going to teach you the exact same things that mining did for me with Bitcoin. And so every engineer right now should be spending 2 weeks just messing around with Ethereum. And then once you've done that, spend 2 more weeks messing around with Bitcoin. Go compile your own software, run your own node, implement your own mining pool just at home, just for the fun of it. And then the third thing would be, make your own Bitcoin wallet. If you do those 3 things routinely for every single coin you encounter, you will be unstoppable and no one can touch you. And that will give you an edge over so many people in the space.
Interesting. I mean, Ethereum, there's like what is it, that thing that you use? What's the starter software where you start learning to develop an Ethereum with Solidity?
Solidity, yeah. Do you mean Truffle Suite? Or?
Yeah. So people use Truffle, or they use the other free one that that's I think off the Polkadot site or one of those sites.
Not familiar with that one. But yeah, Truffle has a really good IDE to start learning. And actually, I think most, even VS Code has, now an extension for Ethereum. So just getting familiar. And the first thing to start with always is, I recommend always starting with running your own node, bootstrapping your own node. Crypto is one part. It's a very interesting mix of skills you need. You need to understand how networking and communications work. And you need to have that skill set, even if you are not an engineer yourself. No matter what you're doing in crypto, you need to understand how peer-to-peer networks work. Running your own node will help with that. So always run your own node for a coin that you're diving into. Compiling your own wallet will help a lot and go towards teaching you some really basic skills. And then from there, Bitcoin, making your own Bitcoin transactions rather than using a wallet. That will help a lot with the CLI tool. And these things, you have to understand, in 2009, 2010, I watched people that had absolutely no programming experience do these things. They're not out of reach or out of the realm of anyone. And during my time at Core Scientific, we had close to 50, 60 people that came from finance and accounting and from all these different backgrounds. They weren't engineers, and they were running their own miners and learning how to go and change out the firmware and optimize and tune these rigs and how to manage them and account for them. Again, these things aren't out of anyone's reach. All you have to have is that drive, that desire to go and learn. So yeah, I think the only thing is just get started.
With Ethereum moving to like the 2.0 and I don't know if you say EWASM or the WebAssembly backend, I think, away from EVM, does that make a difference in what you would recommend, or would you still recommend people go and like learn about the EVM, and even though it's transitioning?
Yeah, they're still going to use, so EVM is still going to be in place for proof of stake So that won't disappear for quite some time. EWASM's not ready yet for like mainstream adoption, but yes, the interesting thing about the EVM is the EVM now powers pretty much every smart contract chain out there. Solana, it powers a form of Polkadot, it powers Kusama. Learning smart contract programming, learning Solidity, it's going to give you skills to go into all of these other blockchain projects. And even if you're not a fan of like Solana or Polkadot, you can go jump on over, go to Binance Chain and all of their, derivative projects that they have. It's a fundamental skill. And then if you're going to go into Ethereum, the only other advice I have is do not become a maximalist. That's true for all of us. Like no matter what coin you hold, remember we're all here for the same goal, to build a better world. And so we have to learn how, like, if you're an Ethereum maximalist, you need to understand how Bitcoin works so that you can understand where are the perceived inefficiencies so you can fix them in the Ethereum landscape and vice versa. Mm-hmm. That's why there's so many cryptocurrency coins. It's not because they inherently want to compete with each other. It's just because they have a different version of what an ideal world looks like. And they're building communities around this vision in this world.
What's your version of the better world? What's the better world look like with Kristy at the helm?
I really want to find a way where every single piece of hardware that a human being owns powers a blockchain. Everything from your phone to any Bluetooth device you have in your house, and you always get rewarded for the equivalent compute. And a better world is entirely run on zero knowledge proofs. So everything is confidential out the gate, private, you own your own data, but most importantly, it's efficient. And it's a world that is entirely run by code, not humans. Removing the middleman is the ultimate dream of blockchain. And I find that many blockchain projects still try to put the human in the middle, and we need to remove that.
It seems like we're so far away from that future, mostly because, the web as we know it today isn't built that way. Most of the processes, infrastructure, regulations, definitions, identification, the KYC, everything in infrastructure is not that. How do you see us fast tracking to that?
More time, more engineers. Crypto is it's in the early days right now. I would say that this is the first year we've finally started to go mainstream. And the next 3 years are going to be incredibly exciting. I think that's when the change is going to happen. You have a lot of regulators that are getting into power right now that are crypto savvy. You have a lot of money in this space that is going to power those, those regulators and government officials. And surprisingly, the US, we might think that it's not crypto friendly, but it actually is trying to be quite crypto friendly. There's a small group of loyalists to crypto that are in the government right now fighting to keep this space alive. And I think that's going to grow over time. I think what people have realized is crypto is unstoppable by its very nature. And it's not just about the technology, it's about the social movement as much as it is the technical movement. And that is a force to be reckoned with. That can't be stopped. So more time, and then eventually I think the more engineers that get involved, the more people that get motivated and passionate about how crypto can truly bring self-sovereignty to each of us, that's when it will start, when we'll be able to start accelerating to having an entirely blockchain-driven world.
Amazing. We have 3 questions all in a row, so I'm going to call them in order. Alina, Megadon, then Brigitta. So Alina says, hello, Kristy. What do you think about ETH mining on Coinbase or other apps? Maybe she means ETH staking, or maybe she means ETH mining. I don't know.
I don't think you can mine on Coinbase right now. You will be able to do staking on all of these exchange providers at some point. I think that it's great because exchanges are like service providers, right? They have a duty to be that bridge between the traditional world and those of us who deal in fiat and the crypto world. There's a danger with too much centralization and too many of these, too many validators, we call them. So those are the specific types of nodes you get in proof of stake. Too many validators being run by Coinbase, too much capital and lockup at Coinbase. What happens if Coinbase uses their own client version and it has a mainstream bug and they're 70% of the network? Boom, Ethereum's dead. So there's all these risks that inherently come from centralization, but they can be minimized. And Coinbase, as a company in particular, its co-founder, Brian Armstrong, he's dedicated to making sure Coinbase is as decentralized as possible. And so I think as long as you have the right leader at the helm of a centralized company, it can work. Someone who's got their eye on being truly decentralized. But yeah, definitely when ETH staking rolls out, if you're not comfortable running your own node, but you still want to get involved, the exchanges will be a good way and a good route for that.
Well, thank you. Next question from Megadon is, are you developing right now and on which chain? ETH?
I am developing right now. I have hobbyist projects. So I have hobbyist projects on many chains. Big fan of Solana right now. That's where I'm tinkering a bit. But no, I'm actually working on a separate blockchain project. So it is not EVM. It has nothing to do with ETH. Not a fork of any other blockchain project.
Interesting. Next up, Brigitta, and then the Mark's question. Brigitta, you want to ask?
Hi, Chrissy. Thanks so much. I really like listening to your big worldview and your hope for the future. I'm wondering whether, I'm looking for ways in which universal basic income can come from something other than taxes. Can it come from us owning our own data and entering marketplaces with our data and generating passive income to cover our universal basic needs? Or is your model the where our hardware is powering the blockchain universally? Could the use of our hardware increase the ability of that hardware to power the blockchain? And could we create an economic, passive income for ourselves through that route? What are your thoughts?
Why not both, right? So the thing with owning your own data is that the FANGs have invested a lot of time and money and have built an entire app ecosystem on your data. So taking that out and changing that paradigm that isn't just one person's job. That's a 50 to 60 year job to turn that around. But in the short term, yes, you'd be surprised like how much hardware you'd have just sitting around in your kitchen or in your living room that has very small amounts of energy that just sits idle and is not utilized. It's still drawing from the wall. Why not start putting that to use? And so in an ideal world, it would be everything you do, everything you transact, it's all wrapped up into a zero knowledge proof container that you own as a user, and you can license that out. And it will still be the same. Like Google buys your data for pennies on the dollar. Well, now they're buying it, but now they don't have to interact with a broker in the middle. They can just click a button and go, hey, I want to get the data on all 35-year-old females in San Francisco that like the color pink. And they put that query in, boom, they can download all of this data, pay their money up front. And the people that actually fit into that category, boom, they've licensed out their data. It's not tied to their real name. It's through a zero knowledge proof contract. And at the end, that data, at the end of the contract term per se, they have to pay again for the data if they want access to it. So there's lots of cool things we can do with a truly ZKP run world, but it's a 50 to 60 year journey. But in the meantime, yes, have all of your hardware power these chains. Zero knowledge proofs are incredibly computationally intensive. They're fascinating, but the verification and validation does take hardware. Fun fact, proof of stake also takes hardware. People don't like to talk about that, but if you're running a node, it's got to run somewhere. And validators, while they don't translate to a lot of CapEx because they don't require ASICs, they do require a lot of OpEx because they have a much higher operational security cost associated with them. And again, if something goes wrong on a validator level, you get slashed. So, depending on the chain you're using, a quarter to half to sometimes 70% of your money just disappears if your validator drops off and you don't have a backup beacon. So that would be my ideal world of combining both and building out more and more paths where your data, as a user, you don't want to be like actually loading up your data. You just want to have what happens now, but you get paid for it, right? So like your phone's already collecting everything you do. Okay, so let's all wrap that up in a ZKP. Let's fingerprint it so it's uniquely yours. And now if a company wants to purchase that data, rather than going through the broker that sells it, they just have to license it from you, and it happens on chain. And you get 10 cents every time that comes into your bank account. And you get 2 cents for every transaction you process. That is the ultimate end goal of crypto. Be so decentralized that, there's no one point of failure.
Perfect. So last question though, where will this happen first? What you've just described?
I think it's going to happen here in America. And I think it's going to happen actually on the Bitcoin network before it happens on Ethereum.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Fabulous.
Thank you, Brigitte. 3 new questions from Mark, Magdon, and Raphael. Mark says, what's your take on Taproot?
No particular take. I'm really excited that it happened. And I was fascinated by the way that it was executed, because after all of the craziness of SegWit, Taproot was very smooth. The mining pools got together, they chatted about it, and then they made like a mini pact between them. They're like, this is great for Bitcoin. Let's do this. Let's make sure we stand united. And they implemented it, and the users implemented it. And Taproot is Bitcoin's first major feature upgrade since, I don't know when, a long time. Mm-hmm. And I think Taproot's going to be bringing in more people into the ecosystem as well. Privacy, anything to do with privacy, anything to do with compression, that just really excites the types of engineers that come into cryptocurrency. So I think it's just great that it went through so smoothly, and I'm looking forward to what's going to happen for Bitcoin in the next big feature release.
Wow, cool. Thank you for that. Megadon goes back to Universal Basic Income. UBI, running a Guardian node on any device in the Theta network. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that could be a way to bring up UBI. It's not going to come from one chain. It's not going to come from one source. We're going to live in a world where there are many, many different chains. Mm-hmm. And what will be interesting is getting the hardware manufacturers to now support all of these different chains. In the same way where you buy a smart TV and you can now install Netflix, but also Hulu, but also, all these other apps. You should be able to just click what apps you want to install. I now want this, TV to be allocated to the Theta network from 3 to 7 p.m. and then to the Ethereum network from 7 p.m. till midnight, etc. You should be able to set up those schedules. And the interesting thing is hardware manufacturers are paying attention to this space, and they're open to doing these creative sorts of deal structures and deal flows because it gives them an advantage over their competitors.
Interesting. Raphael asks, are you familiar with Rainfall? They seem to be doing this monetization of data.
I am not familiar with Rainfall. I'll have to check them out. I'd be very curious about, it's easy to do the actual monetization of data. It's really hard on the other end to find sellers that will purchase that data from you and from your
site. He's got it's a pretty good size thing. I have some partners out in Silicon Valley that are familiar with it, that have referred him to me a couple of times. It's an early blockchain program, but a lot of the AI companies are utilizing Rainfall because they're generating so much data for the user that they feel like rather than having to charge somebody, if anything, in a Web3, we're going to have companies that actually pay us to participate with them, which is such a cool flip of that whole economy, right? Now it's going to be like, okay, how much is Netflix paying you a month to watch their shows, right? I mean, it's not going to be that easy, but there are going to be some companies out there that you're like, hey, I made $200 a month off of company X for opening permissions to whatever they needed at that point that McKinsey asked for. And they said, hey, we'll pay you $100 million for this much data. And then they go out and they poll 1 billion people, and all you do is flip the switch. So it's a really cool project. If you want more information, you can connect with me as well, for sure.
Love it. And in a similar vein, there's also a Numerai, which is basically building the world's first crowd-funded quant fund with data scientists. So that's another similar thing. There's a giant pot of money. It's like $1 billion plus, stupid amount. And data scientists get together and they build their own models that train on this data set that's allowed.
How do you spell it?
Numerai. So I'll put it in the comments for everyone.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of projects like this that are, again, going back to that incentive engineering. How do we crowdsource all of these people to come work for us in a way that's opt-in and opt-out? That's the important thing. Way more attractive than having a full-time job where you're, required to go in 9 to 5. At any time, you can just decide, you know what, I'm bored with this. Opt out. Move on to the next thing.
So crazy. Adam asks, have you looked into Olympus DAO or Abracadabra Money? $spell, $MIM. Thoughts?
I have looked into Olympus DAO. I haven't looked into Abracadabra. I will check that out after this. Olympus DAO is really interesting. For what I like about Olympus isn't quite the technology. Coins that are trying to be better stable coins or better forms of the US dollar don't interest me that much personally as an engineer, but I am curious about them as from an experimental point of view. What's interesting is Olympus managed to build such a fantastic community, which is really difficult to do when you're building a coin like that, a stable coin. I've never seen it. You don't see people excited about Tether. You don't see people excited about all these other stable coins, but Olympus DAO managed to do that. They've built an entirely fantastic, young, driven community that has basically become their crowdsourced marketing team. And they go out and they spread the gospel of Olympus and 3x3, and it works really well. So they're very interesting projects. Everything in DeFi right now is very interesting.
Can we go back to Solana? So you said you were really excited about Solana. A few of us were talking recently and we're like, why is Solana so big and so, why is everyone so crazy about it? Is it because Sam Bankman-Fried put his, influence and stamp on it, Solana's the shit? Is there really something that's driving why Solana's doing so great?
Part of that is Solana is trying to build a partner to Ethereum solely for DeFi. And so they've managed to find a way to optimize smart contracts using hardware, the same stuff that I was talking about. Validators that have a GPU can turn on this additional feature, and they can process and validate transactions and verify smart contracts far faster. And so Solana it's basically the middle ground between ETH 1.0 and ETH 2.0. That was what was really exciting. It had lower fees, and it was launched in there at a time when the NFT craze was hitting. So everyone sort of dropped over there. It's built for engineers first, which is really sexy in this space. And again, we are still an engineer-driven space. So that's really important. Most people mess up when they're building a blockchain project. They try and target everyone first instead of focusing on one niche and then moving to the next niche. And so Solana, being an engineer-driven company and an engineer-driven team, said, right, we're going to go after the engineers and developers first. We're going to go mainstream there. Then we'll start getting the artists and the people that create, and then we'll go mainstream. They have fantastic documentation, and people are just in general crazy because they think Solana might have solved a bit of the scalability problems. And I would agree with that. All these new projects that are coming out right now, they're all different experiments on how do we solve the decentralized scalability problem. because for those of you who aren't familiar, there's something called Zuko's triangle, which essentially says you can only have 2 of these points, and it's decentralization, it's scalability, and I think the other one was privacy. You can get 2. You can't get all 3. I'm probably saying that wrong, actually, but look up Zuko's triangle after this. And Solana might, is trying to achieve all 3 of those. So
Tricky. Then Adam wrote, what's your response when someone mentions Solana has stalled multiple times? There's a large VC stake dumping on retailers now. I mean, I haven't heard the other side really.
Well, you can, if there was a large VC stake, you could trace that on the blockchain, because the great thing is everything's on chain. And if there was a large VC stake, you would see it. Their wallets are public, and you can easily de-anonymize traffic on chain. And quant funds do this at scale, and so do some of the researchers in this space and people like me. So no, there's no one dumping. So Solana's had a few network hiccups, and this is normal. People don't remember because all the new folks have gotten into Bitcoin now, but once upon a time, the Bitcoin network was down for a few days. Once upon a time, Bitcoin had a massive inflation bug that minted 10 billion coins. Bitcoin has been down so many times between 2009 and 2011. It's crashed, because that's what happens when it's new software that you're crowd building with, a global decentralized team. Same with Ethereum. Ethereum has network hiccups and stalls and forks all the time. This is a thing. If Solana was truly centralized, there wouldn't be any network hiccups, because you wouldn't need to coordinate with a decentralized team of validators. It would just be, oh, the network is down, let's push out a bug fix. Boom, I clicked my button, and now all the validators have upgraded. Solana stalled because there's so many validators on all these different time zones from so many different backgrounds and that speak so many languages that they needed to, work with this whole team and make sure they understand, here's the new software update, here's what it does. Can you please go upgrade your validators? So I think that's the important thing. And VCs, no VC in crypto actually invests in a cryptocurrency chain or project or company without understanding intimately how this space works. We know hard forks happen, we know soft forks happen, we know network hiccups happen. It's normal. And I guess the final thing I would say is Solana isn't out of beta yet. It's not actually launched. It's still in, I think it might actually still be in alpha. So remember, in crypto, we launch our alpha and beta projects and put it on mainnet, so that we can build it in real time with our users. I don't know of many other companies that actually do that.
That's true. So everything's early, and we're early.
Yes.
All right. Wow. We have enough time for maybe like 1 or 2 questions if anybody wants to pop in. Otherwise, I guess what's top of mind for you, Kristy, as we head, to the close of 2021, and what should the community be thinking about, whether you're from the crypto or blockchain community, us as a family, what should we be thinking about as we head into 2022?
Making your voice heard to the regulators. The recent bill that has passed is scary for all of us, and how we're defining a broker in this space. Here's the thing, in crypto, there's no such thing as an investor. I think that's really important to understand. There's what, this is going to sound weird. There's no such thing as a passive investor. There's people that we call hodlers. A hodler's job is to get educated about the product and the project, and then go out and educate other people. Their job is basically, global marketing as an influencer. So if you do not have engineering skills, if you do not have design skills, if you can't contribute to a crypto project in any of the other ways, then you become a bag holder, a hodler. And you go out and you talk about the project and you make your voice heard. You educate people. That is your job. Crypto only works if all of us play our role. Think about it like a giant network that we're building together. So we all have a role to play. too often, we have people that are just very passive bag holders where they'll just buy. They're like, lol, once I get 600%, I'll just dump. Like, that is the wrong mentality. Crypto doesn't scale and doesn't change the world that way. It's do your research, learn about your particular projects, invest in them, and then go spread the gospel, as weird as that sounds. Talk about it, educate people.
Oh, awesome. I've actually never heard of that actually being said, but now that you say it, I'm like, yeah, that totally does make sense. It's, blockchain is about network effects and community above else, and not me versus I and me versus them. It's, us, together we rise.
Exactly.
If folks want to get in touch with you, keep in touch, find out about your super secret stealth project as soon as it's launched and get involved, what's the best way for people to get in touch?
Twitter, always Twitter, at ohgotagirl, and I'll drop it in the comments, but generally Twitter is the best way to keep in touch with me.
I found that actually.
Crypto runs on Twitter, man. Crypto runs on Twitter.
Megadon says, will we ever have a decentralized bridge to cash out or use your crypto in the real world?
Yeah, and we kind of already do. There's now projects that allow, sushi swap to fiat, or sushi swap to credit card. It's going to take some time, and they're probably not going to run in the US. They're not going to be projects that are US born at this time, but yeah, I do think we're going to eventually see that. There's always going to need to be an exchange in between, unless you're getting your cash from somewhere else, and that's a little concerning. But yeah, I think we're going to see it on Coinbase first. Again, Coinbase is the only company I've seen that really has this mentality of being decentralized first.
Interesting. Brigitte says, predictions for the next 5 to 10 years.
Oh, I think we're going to start to see in the next 5 years more. I'm going to lose so many friends over this, but I think we're going to start to see more apps actually building on top of the Lightning Network and on top of Bitcoin eventually, instead of Ethereum and Solana, for the sole reason because the market capitalization and the user base and the potential money that you can make is so much bigger. I think Ethereum is going to completely replace a lot of the computing infrastructure that we have today, and it's going to compete with Google and AWS. We already have some pretty cool video games being built on Ethereum. And for those of you who are paying attention to the zero knowledge proof space, there's now DNNs and CNNs being trained on Starknet, which is a zero knowledge proof compatible EVM. So I think Ethereum is going to completely replace computing, but I think most apps that are pretty lightweight and just want to kind of be remittance or payment options, or just do really basic payments, but then wrap it up in some gameplay, are going to go onto Bitcoin.
Interesting. Wow. Dropping knowledge left and right. So good to see you, Kristy. We'll have to go and eat sushi sometime.
Yes. Yes.
Sure. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and answer questions. Everyone, follow Kristy at ohgotagirl on Twitter, and she's very, very responsive for someone so busy. So, tweet at her and let her know, give her a shout out. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Happy Friday. Happy November 12th. Stay warm, safe, and dry out there because it's raining over here.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you, Kristy. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is non-technical, fun, informative way to learn about money, Bitcoin, blockchains, crypto, and digital assets. This podcast is not financial advice, and your reactions are your total and complete responsibility, y'all. Now, thanks again, and enjoy the show.
What are you doing?
Stuck inside.